In this section, we'll talk about specific formatting requirements as established by the graduate school. Once again, if you do have a copy of your thesis available either in hard or soft version, please break it out. That way you can follow along as we go through this section. This is your title page, which is a mandatory page, I should add. Things to remember, as shown on the screen here, are you will not have a visible page number on this page. In other words, you will not have any page numbers up here. Technically, it is Roman numeral 1, but you will need to either hide that number or make it disappear. Make sure that the spacing between what we call your blocks of text are consistent. For example, this is a block, this is a block, this is a block, and this is a block. Note that the spacing between each section is consistent. We will be looking for that. Make sure that your text is centered between the right and left margins. The margins on this page are the same as any other page. The left margin is 1.5. Top is officially 1, but again, you'll start your heading at 2 inches down, 1 inch, and then 1.25 inches. Make sure that your name, title, and degree also match as necessary. For example, again, make sure that this matches with the information that you submit in your ETD information and on your forms. As far as your degree, make sure that this matches, and also the date, make sure that that matches as well. The date will always be May, August, or December, and then whatever year you plan to graduate. The reason for this is because those are your official graduation months for Purdue. So please do not use things like your defense date. It will always be May, August, or December. Also, don't forget to put your campus information at the bottom. For most candidates, it will be West Lafayette, Indiana. And do not use what we call postal contractions for Indiana. In other words, don't use IN. Spell out the word Indiana for clarity. Dedication page, this is an optional page. You do not have to put this in if you don't want to. However, if you do, then this is what your typical dedication page will look like. It will have a page number just like any other page. In other words, Roman numeral 2 in this case. But you do not have to put a main header, so you don't have to put dedication here. You can remove that. As far as your actual text right here, just keep it short and to the point and tasteful. If you do want to use non-English text or non-Roman characters, such as Chinese, Russian, Korean, so on and so forth, that's fine. Again, though, as long as your dedication is short and tasteful. And do not list this section in your table of contents. That is not necessary. The next section is acknowledgements. Again, this is an optional section, but as you can see, it looks a little bit more like the main body of your text. You will have a chapter style heading, 2 inches down, centered and capitalized. This will be, page will be numbered, either Roman numeral 2 or 3 normally. As far as your text right here, it will be the same, it will be set up the same way as your text in your main body of your thesis. In other words, if you're using 1.5 spacing in the main part of your text, this section will also be 1.5 as well. And again, you do not have to list this in your table of contents. This is a sample table of contents, and again, as you can see, you need to be consistent, need to be as neat and orderly as possible. In other words, avoid what we call dancing page numbers on the right-hand side of your page. By that we mean where it's just kind of snaking down like that. This often comes from doing space, dot, space, dot, space, dot. If you're not sure how to properly set up your table of contents, you may want to check the help function of Word. Ensure that your leader dots are consistent as well when they're going across the page. So in other words, don't have large gaps between individual dots. Also, do not use dashes in this section. We want underlined dots. Okay? As far as the page numbers, again, make sure that everything is consistent and correct on the right-hand side. Also, make sure that you put what we call a little page mini header right here. capital P, small a, small g, small e. That goes above your page numbers on the right-hand side, and this mini header will appear on every single page of this section. You may have to manually add it as well, even in the template, because these do not automatically populate. And please do not list your table of contents in your table of contents. That is not necessary. This is the second page of a typical page of contents. You are not locked into any particular style here, but this is a common way that we see it. If you want to do something unusual, then let us know and we will discuss it with you. But as you can see in this case, on the second page, your text starts now at 1 inch from the top of the page. Again, you repeat that little mini header and everything else is consistent. Another thing to watch is that if you have multiple appendices, you will have to add what we call a general heading for your appendices right there. It is not numbered, it is not counted, but it does look very similar to a typical chapter heading. So please keep that in mind because you may have to manually add it even if you are using the template. List of tables. This is an optional section, but if you have more than 1 or 2 tables in your thesis, we strongly encourage you to include one of these in your preliminary section. So as you can see, everything is pretty much set up the same way as for a table of contents. Again, you'd have an appropriate heading, appropriate page number, and of course your captions and page numbers there. In this case, you also do have an extra mini header on the left-hand side table, and again, this will appear on every single page of this particular section if you have more than one page. This is a list of figures. Again, it looks very similar, and pretty much what holds for the list of tables also holds for the list of figures as well. That being said, if you have extremely long captions for your tables and figures, then if you wish to condense them down a bit in order to keep them manageable, then normally that's fine as long as they're otherwise legible. In many cases, candidates do have sections like a list of symbols, abbreviations, nomenclature, glossary. What you see on the screen here is just a typical example of a nomenclature. Again, these are treated as major sections, so they will have a chapter style heading. Of course, they'll be numbered and counted like any other page. And you can set them up pretty much any way you want to do it. In this case, this individual simply alphabetized everything according to the particular term. You can put them up in the front of your thesis, or you can even put them in the back of your thesis, but what we normally see is candidates putting them in the front of the thesis. That way they identify all the terms from the very beginning before we actually start reading text. This is your abstract. This is a mandatory section. So again, you have a chapter style heading here. It would be appropriately numbered. This is your first paragraph. This is what we call your personal paragraph. It has your name, degree, of course, Purdue University, graduation date, title, and your major professor or professors' names. So make sure that you include this. Also note that in Purdue formatting requirements, this personal paragraph is single-spaced. This is an exception to the rule. This section will be spaced the same way as the rest of your text, 1.5 or double-spaced, but this will always be single-spaced here. For your title, you don't have to put all capitals or put it in quotation marks. That's not necessary unless there's a compelling reason to do that. Just the way you see it on the screen here is perfectly fine. Titles and departments of major professors are not required unless they specifically ask for them. Again, in some cases they may want to have a professional title like DVM, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, added afterwards. As a rule, we do not have a problem with that. Definitely do not include images, tables, figures, or equations in this section unless absolutely necessary. The reason for this is because it may be difficult to put these items in if people are manually doing data entry for your abstract information. So again, try to keep it in text as much as possible. We do not have a limit on the length of your abstract, but brevity is a virtue. Normally we see abstracts of about 1.5 pages, but we have seen them as little as 1 sentence or as long as 7 pages. It just depends on what your needs are. Publications, some departments do require you also add a publication that discusses content within your thesis. In this case, what you see on the screen here is an example from a chemistry journal. These would normally be placed immediately after your abstract and given Roman numeral pagination. So it's the last Roman numeral section of your thesis normally. And if you place it after your vita, it would be assigned Arabic pagination. So it would be normally the last Arabic section of your thesis. This section is always preceded by a cover page, which we'll discuss a little bit later on. And if you want to just do a scan of the original publication, that's fine. But again, make sure that it's fully legible and that, more importantly, if you have page numbers on the original article, make sure they don't conflict with your thesis page numbers. So in other words, if you do have like a page number up here from the original article, you may need to either delete that or cover it up so your actual correct thesis page number appears in the upper right-hand corner. If you do want to use actual articles as chapters, please contact the Thesis and Dissertation Office and we'll discuss it with you. Normally we don't have a problem with this, but what we do ask is that you try to keep the formatting of your article as similar to Purdue formatting requirements as possible. Okay, let's spend a couple of minutes talking about how you should set up your text. The main thing is that your thesis text must be consistently organized. Also an important item is the first chapter will always start with Arabic page 1, as you can see on the screen here. Please do not carry over your Roman numeral pagination into the main body of your thesis. You will need to do a reset. So after normally your abstract ends with the last Roman numeral page number, the first page of your first chapter will start with Arabic 1. Another thing to keep in mind is that make sure you don't accidentally and incorrectly number your pages. An example of this might be the first page of the first chapter is 1, which is what it should be, but then accidentally the next page of this chapter is also Arabic 1, and that of course would throw off all your page numbering. So again, be meticulous about checking your page numbers and making sure everything is in correct sequence. Also check for things like blank lines at the tops of pages, and check your MS Word point spacing in page layout to make sure everything is set up correctly. Definitely be consistent with your headings. This is what a correct chapter heading will look like, 2 inches down, centered, and in all capitals. What we also ask is try to keep your spacing between your main heading and then the first subheading. Try to use about 3 single space lines. That seems to provide a very consistent, neat, and uniform appearance. And again, use all capitals on major or what we call chapter style headings unless there's a compelling reason not to do that. If you do have any questions about that, feel free to call us at the Graduate School.